The afternoon sun beat down on the quiet suburban street as Monique pulled into her driveway. She let out a tired sigh, grateful to be home after a long day showing houses to picky clients. The thought of cooling off in her backyard pool was the only thing that had kept her going through her last appointment. Monique wasn't born with a silver spoon in her mouth. Far from it. She had grown up in a small apartment with her mom working 2 jobs to make ends meet. That's why buying this house 3 years ago had meant everything to her. It wasn't huge or fancy, but it was hers, paid for with countless overtime hours and careful saving. And the jewel of the property was the small but beautiful backyard pool. Worth every penny, she often told herself on summer evenings when she and her daughter Tiana would float in the cool water, watching the stars come out. For a 10-year-old with boundless energy, the pool was a blessing, especially during school breaks. Today, Monique kicked off her heels at the door and headed straight to the kitchen for a glass of cold water. She glanced out the window toward her backyard and froze. Something wasn't right. The pool cover had been moved. Again. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered, setting her glass down harder than she meant to. This was the 4th time in the past month. She'd come home to find signs that someone had been using her pool while she was at work. The first time, she thought maybe the wind had shifted the cover. The second time, she noticed wet footprints leading from the side gate. By the third time, she'd installed a simple security camera. Monique grabbed her tablet and pulled up the camera feed, her jaw tightening as the video confirmed her suspicions. There she was again. A middle-aged woman with highlighted blonde hair and designer sunglasses, letting herself in through the gate like she owned the place. And she wasn't alone. 2 children, probably around 12 and 8, followed her in carrying colorful pool noodles and inflatable toys. The footage showed the woman casually removing the pool cover, setting up a little cooler on Monique's patio table, and then lounging on one of the deck chairs while her kids splashed around. They stayed for nearly 2 hours before packing up and leaving, not even bothering to replace the pool cover properly. The nerve of some people, Monique said to herself, feeling her blood pressure rising. She watched as the woman checked her surroundings before leaving, clearly aware that what she was doing wasn't right, but not caring enough to stop. Monique had never seen this woman before all this started. She'd asked around, and apparently, the woman had moved into a house about 3 blocks away last spring. The houses in that section didn't have pools, but that didn't give her the right to just help herself to someone else's property. Monique had been raised to avoid confrontation. Her mother always told her, "Choose your battles wisely, baby girl." But this was her home, her private space, her hard-earned sanctuary being invaded. Not to mention the liability issues if one of those kids got hurt on her property. She sat at her kitchen table, drumming her fingers on the surface. The real estate office where she worked had taught her the importance of documentation. So far, she'd documented everything: the dates, the times, the video footage. She'd even taken pictures of the gate where the lock had been tampered with. Tomorrow was Friday, her half day at the office. She'd be home by 2 p.m. Let's see if our uninvited guest keeps to her usual schedule, Monique thought, a plan already forming in her mind. She was tired of coming home to find her space violated. It was time to put an end to this nonsense, once and for all. Friday arrived with a kind of heat that made the air shimmer above the pavement. Monique left work at noon, just as she'd planned. She told her boss she needed to prepare for a big weekend showing, which wasn't entirely untrue. She did have a showing on Saturday, but Linda's face flushed as she stared at the security camera. For a moment, Monique thought she might actually apologize and leave. But then Linda's expression hardened, and she reached for her phone on the table. "Fine. If that's how you want to play this, I'll call the police," Linda said, her voice rising. "You're making my children uncomfortable." The older boy looked mortified, sinking lower in the pool. The little girl finally noticed something was wrong and stopped splashing. "Mom," she called out, "what's happening?" "Nothing, sweetie," Linda replied without taking her eyes off Monique. "This lady is just being difficult." Monique shook her head in disbelief. "I'm being difficult? You're the one trespassing on private property." "I told you, this neighborhood has shared spaces," Linda insisted, though her voice had an uncertain edge now. "No, it doesn't," Monique replied calmly. She'd dealt with difficult clients before and knew keeping her cool was important. "I can show you the property deed right now." This pool belongs to my house." Linda ignored this and started dialing on her phone. "Hello? Yes, I need to report someone threatening me and my children." Her voice trailed off as she moved a few steps away. Monique couldn't believe what she was hearing. She pulled out her own phone and began recording. Two could play at this game. "Just so we're clear," Monique said loudly enough for both Linda and her phone recording to pick up, "You're in my backyard using my pool without permission. I've asked you politely to leave my property, and now you're calling the police and falsely claiming I'm threatening you." Linda covered the phone with her hand. "Would you stop? You're making this worse than it needs to be." "I'm just establishing the facts," Monique replied. She turned to the kids in the pool. "I'm sorry, but you need to get out now. This is private property." The boy immediately moved toward the ladder. "Come on, Lily," he said to his sister. "We need to go." "But I don't want to," the little girl whined. "Now, Lily," the boy insisted, showing more maturity than his mother. Linda ended her call with a huff. "They said they're sending someone. Happy now?" "Actually, yes," Monique replied. "The police can help sort this out." Linda's face reddened even more. "I've never had problems using this pool before," she declared loudly, as if volume would make her right. "Because I was at work and didn't know you were breaking into my yard," Monique pointed out. Linda gathered her magazine and wine glass. "You know what? People like you are making this neighborhood so unwelcoming. We were just trying to enjoy a hot day." Monique felt her jaw tighten at the "people like you" comment. She knew exactly what Linda meant, but she wasn't going to take the bait. "People like me?" "Homeowners who don't want strangers using their private property without permission," she asked calmly, making sure her phone was still recording. Linda didn't answer, but shot Monique a look that could curdle milk. The boy had helped his sister out of the pool, and they were both dripping on the deck, looking uncomfortable. "Mom, can we please just go?" the boy pleaded. "No, Tyler. We have every right to be here until the police arrive," Linda insisted, settling back into the lounge chair. Monique sighed and stepped to the side of the gate. "Kids, you can wait in the shade over here if you want," she offered, pointing to a spot under her patio umbrella. She wasn't going to make them suffer for their mother's behavior. The commotion had begun attracting attention. Monique could see her next-door neighbor, Mr. Chen, peering over the fence, and across the street, Mrs. Washington had come onto her porch to see what was happening. "Everything okay over there, Monique?" Mrs. Washington called out. Before Monique could answer, Linda jumped in. "No, it's not. She's harassing us for no reason." Mrs. Washington raised an eyebrow. "Is that right?" She looked at Monique questioningly. "They're using my pool without permission," Monique explained simply. "I came home and found them here." Mrs. Washington's face changed immediately. "Without permission? Well, that's just not right." She came down from her porch and walked across the street toward Monique's yard. Mr. Chen, who had been watching quietly, now opened his gate and walked over as well. "I thought those children sounded unfamiliar," he said, joining them at Monique's gate. "I've been gardening all afternoon and heard splashing, but assumed it was your daughter, Monique." Linda's confident expression began to falter as more neighbors appeared. The elderly couple from 2 doors down, the Thompsons, had noticed the gathering and came to investigate. "What's all the commotion?" Mr. Thompson asked, leaning slightly on his cane. Mrs. Washington filled them in. "This lady has been using Monique's pool without asking." "Is that so?" Mrs. Thompson peered at Linda through her thick glasses. "Young lady, that's trespassing plain and simple." Linda stood up, clearly not expecting this neighborhood solidarity. "It's not like that. I thought this was a community pool." "Community pool?" Mr. Chen chuckled. No. The community pool is over on Maple Street, been closed for repairs this summer." "That's what I told her," Linda said quickly. "But my kids needed somewhere to swim, and this pool was just sitting here empty most days." Mrs. Thompson shook her head disapprovingly. "That doesn't make it public property, dear." "I've lived on this street for 37 years, Mr. Thompson added, his voice carrying the weight of neighborhood history, "and I remember when the previous owners put this pool in. It's always been a private pool for this house." Monique felt a wave of gratitude for her neighbors. She hadn't expected this level of support. "Thank you all," she said sincerely. Linda looked increasingly uncomfortable as more eyes turned to her. Her children stood awkwardly on the deck, still dripping, the boy trying to wrap a towel around his sister's shoulders. "Well, you still didn't have to make such a big deal about it," Linda muttered, but her voice had lost its edge. "You could have just asked nicely." Mr. Chen raised an eyebrow. Did she not ask nicely? "She did," the boy, Tyler, said suddenly, then ducked his head when his mother glared at him. Mrs. Washington crossed her arms. "You know, you're not the first person to have problems with this lady." Linda's head snapped up. "Excuse me." "Oh yes," Mrs. Washington continued. "The Paddles on Oak Street mentioned someone matching your description tried to use their hot tub last month. And someone kept parking in my assigned spot at the townhouses," Mr. Chen added. "Blue SUV, just like the one down the street there." Linda's face was now bright red. "This is ridiculous. I'm not going to stand here and be ganged up on by the whole neighborhood." "Nobody's ganging up on you," Monique said calmly. "These are just the facts." A police car pulled up in front of the house, and a young officer stepped out. Linda immediately straightened her posture and put on a smile. "Finally," she muttered, heading toward the gate. "Now we'll get this sorted out properly." The officer approached the gathering, looking slightly confused at the crowd. "We received a call about a disturbance." "Yes, officer," Linda said, stepping forward. "I'm the one who called." "She's the one trespassing," Mrs. Thompson said bluntly, pointing at Linda. The officer looked between them. "Okay, let's take this one step at a time. Who owns this property?" "I do," Monique said, stepping forward with her phone still recording. "This is my home. I came back from work early today and found this woman and her children using my pool without permission. It's not the first time." The officer turned to Linda. "Ma'am, is this true? Are you on this property without the owner's permission?" Linda's confident front finally cracked. "It's not that simple. There was a misunderstanding about neighborhood amenities and—" "There was no misunderstanding," Tyler interrupted, surprising everyone. "Mom, you told us nobody would mind if we used it when they weren't home. You said the worst that could happen was someone asking us to leave." The look Linda gave her son could have frozen the pool water. "Is that right?" the officer asked, turning back to Linda with a more serious expression. Linda seemed to realize her position was crumbling. She grabbed her son's arm. "We're leaving. Come on, Lily, get your things." "Ma'am, I need you to answer the question," the officer said firmly. But Linda was already gathering her belongings, stuffing them haphazardly into a beach bag. "This whole neighborhood is ridiculous," she muttered loudly. "So unfriendly and unwelcoming." The weekend passed quietly after Linda's dramatic exit. Monique spent Sunday afternoon floating in her pool with Tiana, finally able to enjoy their backyard sanctuary in peace. But she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. "You seem worried, Mom," Tiana said, paddling around on her inflatable unicorn. Monique forced a smile. "Just thinking, baby, nothing for you to worry about." But there was plenty to worry about. What if Linda came back when they weren't home? What if she damaged something in retaliation? The security camera was a good start, but Monique knew she needed to do more to protect her property. Monday morning, instead of heading straight to the office, Monique made two important stops. First, she visited the local police station with her security footage and filled out a formal report about the repeated trespassing. "Has she made any threats?" asked Officer Reynolds, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes but a no-nonsense attitude. "Not directly," Monique replied. But she said this isn't over when she left. Officer Reynolds nodded, making a note. "Smart of you to document everything. Most people don't think to do that until it's too late." Her next stop was to see Denise, an attorney friend who specialized in property law. Monique hadn't wanted to bother her over the weekend, but she knew she needed professional advice. "Girl, you did everything right," Denise said after watching the videos and hearing the full story. She leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen against her desk. "You've got multiple incidents on camera, witnesses who can confirm she's done this before, and now a police report. That's a solid foundation." "Foundation for what?" Monique asked. "For whatever comes next," Denise replied. "I'm guessing you want this woman to leave you alone for good, right?" Monique nodded. "Then we have options. We could send a formal cease and desist letter. Or, if you want to make sure she gets the message, we could file for a restraining order." "Isn't that extreme for a pool trespassing?" Monique asked. Denise shook her head. Not when it's repeated behavior and she's shown disregard for your property rights. Plus, that this isn't over comment could be interpreted as a threat. Courts take that seriously. Monique thought about it. Let's start with the letter. Maybe that'll be enough to scare her straight. Fair enough, Denise agreed. But let's also document every penny you spend securing your property because of this. If we end up in court, we can ask for those costs back. That afternoon, Monique called a security company. By Wednesday, they had installed a keypad lock on her gate and 2 additional cameras covering her backyard from different angles. It cost nearly $1,000, money she'd been saving for a weekend trip with Tiana, but Monique considered it a necessary investment in their peace of mind. The formal letter from Denise's office was delivered to Linda's house on Thursday, a thick envelope full of legal language stating that any further trespassing would result in immediate legal action. Monique wasn't there to see Linda receive it, but she imagined it wouldn't be received well. Friday rolled around again, bringing another scorching hot day. Monique had a busy morning of showings planned, but found herself distracted, checking her phone constantly for alerts from her security system. "You okay?" her boss asked during their morning meeting. "You seem jumpy today." "Just expecting a situation at home," Monique replied vaguely. "Anything I can help with?" Monique shook her head. "Not unless you're secretly a bouncer in your spare time." When her boss looked confused, she added, "Just dealing with a trespasser. Nothing I can't handle." But as the day wore on, Monique's anxiety grew. She couldn't focus on her clients or listings. After fumbling through a particularly important showing, she decided to call it a day. "Family emergency," she told her boss, who nodded understandingly. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every red light seemed determined to delay her. When she finally turned onto her street, her heart nearly stopped at the sight of a familiar blue SUV parked not down the block this time, but right in front of her house. "You have got to be kidding me," Monique muttered, pulling into her driveway. Her phone buzzed with an alert from her security system, motion detected at pool gate. She didn't need the alert to know Linda had returned. The question was, what was she going to do about it this time? Monique sat in her car for a moment, collecting herself. This time would be different. This time she was prepared. She pulled out her phone and called the police non-emergency number she'd saved after filing her report. "Yes, hello. This is Monique Carter at 1423 Oakwood Drive. I'm calling to report that the woman I filed a trespassing report about last week has returned to my property. She's currently in my backyard." She listened for a moment. "Yes, I'll wait here until an officer arrives. Thank you." Next, she texted Denise, "She's back. At my house now." The response came immediately. "Stay calm. Document everything. Officer on the way." "Yes," Monique replied. "Perfect. Call me after." Monique took a deep breath and stepped out of her car. Instead of going through the side gate, she went through her front door. She wanted to see exactly what Linda was doing before confronting her. Moving quietly through her house, Monique peered out the kitchen window. Linda was alone this time, no kids. She was sitting at Monique's patio table writing something in a notebook. The pool cover was still on. That was strange. If she wasn't here to swim, what was she doing? Monique's doorbell rang, startling her. She wasn't expecting the police this quickly. But when she opened the door, it wasn't a police officer. It was Mr. Chen and Mrs. Washington. "We saw her car," Mr. Chen explained, his expression concerned. "And then we saw you pull up. Is everything okay?" "I called the police," Monique said. "They're on their way." Mrs. Washington nodded approvingly. "Good. We'll wait with you." "Actually," Monique said, struck by an idea, "could you two be witnesses? I'm going to confront her, and it would help to have you both there." They agreed immediately and followed Monique through the house to the back door. Monique slid it open, and the sound made Linda look up. For a split second, surprise flashed across her face before she composed herself. "What are you doing here?" Monique asked calmly, stepping onto her patio with her neighbors flanking her. Linda closed her notebook. "Just checking something." "Checking what exactly?" "On my private property that you've been legally warned to stay away from." Linda stood up, tucking the notebook into her purse. "You think you're so clever with your legal notices and security cameras, but you don't own the neighborhood." "I never said I did," Monique replied evenly. But I do own this house and this yard and this pool. And you're trespassing, again. I received your little letter, Linda said, her voice dripping with disdain. Very dramatic. Mr. Chen stepped forward. The letter wasn't dramatic, it was the law, and you're breaking it right now. Linda's eyes narrowed. Oh look, you've brought your fan club again. We're not a fan club, Mrs. Washington replied firmly. We're neighbors who believe in respecting other people's property. A police car pulled up in front of the house, its lights flashing but siren off. Monique felt a wave of relief. Perfect timing, she said, loud enough for Linda to hear. That would be the police I called when I saw you here. For the first time, Linda looked genuinely worried. The police? That's ridiculous. I wasn't even swimming this time. Doesn't matter, Monique said. You're on my property without permission after being formally warned to stay away. That's trespassing. They all heard the front doorbell ring. Mrs. Washington offered to let the officer in, leaving Monique and Mr. Chen with Linda. Linda quickly gathered her purse. This is harassment. I'll file a complaint against you. Monique couldn't help but laugh. For what? Protecting my own property. Before Linda could answer, Officer Reynolds walked out onto the patio, followed by Mrs. Washington. It was the same officer who had taken Monique's report earlier in the week. Well, Officer Reynolds said, recognizing the situation immediately. Didn't we just discuss this very scenario, Miss Carter? Monique nodded. Yes, we did. And as you can see, Ms. Winters has returned despite the formal notice she received from my attorney. Officer Reynolds turned to Linda. Ma'am, I need to see some identification. This is outrageous, Linda sputtered, but she reached into her purse for her wallet. Ms. Winters, you were served with legal papers instructing you to stay away from this property, correct? Officer Reynolds asked while examining Linda's driver's license. It was just a letter, not a court order, Linda argued. A cease and desist letter is a legal document, ma'am, Officer Reynolds replied. And you're clearly violating it right now. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just sitting here. On private property that you've been told repeatedly to stay away from, Officer Reynolds said firmly. Ms. Carter has filed multiple reports of trespassing against you with video evidence. Linda's face had gone pale. This clearly wasn't how she'd expected things to play out. Now we have two options here, Officer Reynolds continued. I can arrest you for criminal trespassing, or you can leave peacefully and agree to appear at a hearing for the restraining order that I'm guessing Ms. Carter will now be filing. 2 weeks later, Monique sat in the courtroom, hands folded neatly in her lap. Denise sat beside her, occasionally leaning over to whisper reassurances. The restraining order hearing was scheduled to begin any minute. Nervous? Denise asked. A little, Monique admitted. I've never been to court before. You've got nothing to worry about. The evidence is clear as day. Linda sat on the opposite side of the room with a man Monique assumed was her attorney. She'd traded her designer sunglasses for reading glasses and wore a conservative blue dress instead of her usual flashy attire. The transformation was almost comical, like she was playing dress-up as a respectable citizen. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Judge Wilson was an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The hearing moved quickly. Monique presented her evidence, the security footage, the police reports, the testimony from her neighbors. She spoke clearly and calmly, describing the repeated trespassing incidents without embellishment. The facts spoke for themselves. Linda's attorney tried to paint the situation as a simple misunderstanding between neighbors, but his arguments fell flat when faced with the video evidence. The final nail in the coffin came when Officer Reynolds testified about finding Linda on Monique's property after she'd received the cease and desist letter. In my 20 years on the force, Officer Reynolds stated, I've rarely seen such a blatant disregard for property rights and legal warnings. Judge Wilson didn't take long to make her decision. This court grants the restraining order, she declared. Ms. Winters is to maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from Ms. Carter's property and person for a period of 1 year. But the judge wasn't finished. Additionally, Ms. Winters will reimburse Ms. Carter for all security upgrades necessitated by these incidents, as well as legal fees. She peered over her glasses at Linda. The total comes to $3,247.82. Payment plan information will be provided by the clerk. Linda's face flushed red, but she remained silent. Her attorney whispered something to her, and she nodded stiffly. Outside the courtroom, Monique finally let out the breath she'd been holding. I didn't expect the judge to order her to pay for everything. Denise grinned. I told you we had a solid case. Judge Wilson doesn't mess around with repeat offenders. The victory felt good, but what happened in the following months felt even better. Word of the case spread through the neighborhood, and something unexpected began to happen. The community grew closer. It started with a text from Mrs. Washington. Since we all love swimming so much, why don't we organize a proper neighborhood pool day at the community pool once it reopens next month? The idea took off. By the time the community pool renovations were complete, a committee had formed to plan a block party to celebrate its reopening. Monique found herself in the middle of it all, helping coordinate details and bringing people together. The day of the block party was bright and sunny, perfect pool weather. Families from all over the neighborhood gathered at the community pool, bringing food, music, and games. Children splashed in the water while adults chatted in the shade. You know, we should make this an annual thing, Mr. Chen suggested as he helped Monique set up the food table. I'd like that, she agreed. Mrs. Thompson approached with a plate of her famous brownies. Have you heard the news? The Blue House on Oak Street just went up for sale. Monique raised an eyebrow. Linda's house. Mrs. Thompson nodded, moving to another county from what I hear. Monique didn't feel the satisfaction she expected. Instead, she felt something like pity. Linda had missed out on being part of a wonderful community because of her entitlement and inability to respect boundaries. Later that afternoon, as Monique watched Tiana playing Marco Polo with the neighborhood kids, Mr. Thompson settled into the chair beside her. You know, he said thoughtfully, sometimes it takes someone showing us what not to do to remind us how we should treat each other. Monique smiled. I think you're right. This neighborhood's been here a long time, the old man continued. Seen a lot of changes, but the good ones, the ones that last, they always come from people standing up for what's right. He patted her hand. Like you did. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the water, Monique looked around at her neighbors, now friends, and felt a deep sense of belonging. Her pool at home was special, a sanctuary she had worked hard for. But this sense of community, of shared respect and friendship, this was something even more valuable. And it had all started because she refused to let someone take what wasn't theirs to take.